Okay, we're just trying to get this to everyone to out. Zenith Bank PLC, one of Nigeria's tier one lender, has just announced the result of the sale of his 500 million US dollars, 7.375% notes, which is due for maturity year 2022. Zenith Bank technically is repaying, want to pay back investors, all of this. So, said the tender offer memorandum in an announcement made to the Nigerian Stock Exchange says it has received valid tenders for the purchase of $392.596 million out of the entire portfolio of 500 million US dollars, and said that subject to the minimum denomination the company will pay, that is Zenith Bank, will pay for these notes, which is accepted for purchase at equivalent of $1,085 US dollars, $1,000.85 per $1,000 in principal amount of the note plus accrued interest payment. That will be on September the 13th, and that is today. The notice for the sale went out on September the 4th. Now, Zenith Bank says it has received valid tenders for a total of $392.59 million out of the entire $500 million it plans putting on sale. So all of this is also in the news. We'll talk about that a bit later with Temple Ashaju at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, their market correspondent, checking this in. But this is coming through from Zenith Bank PLC announcing just about a part of the notes that is putting on sale. That note, that debt, 7.375% note is due 2022. Zenith Bank wants to exit this $500 million transaction before the due date. So let's talk to Johnson Chukwu, who is the CEO at Carry Asset Management, about the raft of fiscal policies and getting their feet wet. The new cabinet minister has been working, and one of them making some of the biggest pronouncements in the current week is the Finance, Budget and National Planning Minister, Zainab Ahmed, talking about the MTEF 2020-2022, Budget 2020, rejigging or re-engineering Nigeria's flagging revenue, as well as the now controversial, if you want to put it that way, VAT to 7.2%. What does this all mean for the investment market? But let's start with this. Johnson Chukwu, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Wilson.
Thank you. A quick one. Let's start with let's take politics out of it. Do you think that the market rally on Wednesday and on Thursday has technically taken out part of the political risks that we have in our market, in particular with the Tribunal's decision?
What I would say is that because the market is a sensitive market, the market has been holding its breath, waiting to know the outcome of the Presidential Election Tribunal. The result of that tribunal, which indicates that the current president will continue in office, meant that some level of political uncertainty was lifted. And that was why the market reacted positively for the past 2 days. I mean, we saw a 0.3% appreciation in the market on Wednesday, on the day the verdict was given, and we saw more than a 1% increase in the market index yesterday, a day after the verdict was given. So what that means is that the market feels a sense of relief that some elements of uncertainty have been lifted off the market, the economy.
Okay, so let's take that out and just move on to a broad fiscal policy directions. What do you make of the MTEF projections and the assumptions by the Finance, Budget and National Planning Minister? Do you think this is a reality check time for Nigeria in terms of the oil production, the benchmark, what we think the outlook is for the GDP, a bit lower than what is in the ERGP, which is running into its final year period in 2020? How critical do you think next year MTEF and budget, all of that, mean for Nigeria moving forward into this very critical period?
For me, I think in terms of how critical next year is going to be the foundation on which the economy of this country will be built under this current government. I mean, it's going to signpost how the government will end in terms of economic management. So next year is absolutely necessary that they get it right on the economy next year. But looking at the medium-term expenditure framework that was announced by the Minister of Finance and National Planning, some of the assumptions look quite realistic, and I think those ones are realistic. One is the benchmark oil price of $55 look more realistic than $60 that we're currently running on in 2019 budget. Also, they have reduced the crude production target to 2.1 million barrels per day against the 2.3 million barrels that was budgeted for the past 2 years, which we have never achieved. The only aspect I want them to look at is the 305 naira exchange rate, which today does not apply in any market segment in the country. I think if you use that will actually mean to, one, you will be shortchanging the state government because that will be the rate at which the FAC allocation will be shared. And well, as there is actually no commercial transaction taking place in the country that is being executed at 305 naira to $1. So I think they have to adjust that to something that's more market reflective. Some other assumptions of the budget, like I said, some are quite realistic, some still look quite optimistic. A budgeted revenue of 10.0 trillion naira looks quite optimistic. And I'll tell you why. If you have adjusted the crude production and adjusted the crude price, it then means that the expected revenue from oil is going to go down. So you're expecting the rest to come from non-oil revenue. Granted that the government is planning to increase VAT next year, but you don't know when that increment will take effect because they have to go to the National Assembly, they have to amend the VAT Act. But beyond that, when you increase the VAT rate, you are likely going to see a suppression in consumption. So that means that the level of revenue that government is projecting from VAT may not be actualized in the first year as a result of adjustment in consumption by the average citizen. The other factors are the government has closed the borders from the land borders for importation. So if there's any custom revenue coming from the land borders, it has been shut down. I think if you look at the GDP performance in the last 3 quarters, it might be overly optimistic for anybody to expect that economic activity will go into an upswing and they're going to see a high level of tax revenue from corporate organizations. So I think the non-oil revenue projections might be optimistic, which means that the realization of the 10.07 trillion budget may be a Herculean task.
Okay, so if we look at the VAT, the budget, the MTEF, and of course a few other the revenue that the government is trying to rejig on one hand, then you look at the current economic data. If we roll this back a bit for a week, looking at the Q2 GDP softer than Q1, capital importation significantly down nearly 50% Q on Q, and then you look at the foreign trade. Well, it's bigger, but again, if you look at if you unpack the numbers, you're not looking at. Then we're looking at a balance of trade numbers, Johnson. So, what does it all mean in terms of moving forward? The Vice President yesterday, Mr. Vice President, Professor Oshibajo, says the government is still sticking with lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over a 10-year period. What does this tell you about? Do you think we have what it takes to deliver?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is have to completely restructure our fiscal plan. Under the current fiscal plan, it might be difficult to achieve the target of lifting 10 million people out of poverty on a year basis for the next 10 years. I think the Vice President's statement is a statement that one can say is largely born out of the need to motivate the citizens to be optimistic of the future. But what's on the ground? Let's look at some of the figures you mentioned. Starting from capital importation, the capital importation figure actually dropped by about 31% to just about $5.15 billion. And if you look at the capital importation, not just that it dropped by 31%, more than 4.29 trillion of the capital importation was for portfolio investment, which means what we call hot money. They are not supposed to go into any productive activities. Only about $250 million came in for real sector activities. Even if you desegregate the portfolio investment further, you realize that more than $3.4 billion of that was for money market. It then means that these people were investing in treasury bills or placement with banks, which will show you the volatility of the capital importation that we saw in the second quarter of this year. But beyond that, if you look at other factors relevant to the economy, you just mentioned the issue of a VAT increase. I had said earlier that it's not likely that the increase will have a material effect on the government revenue because you're going to see people reduce their consumption as long as their income is not increased. Government is still prevaricating as it comes to the implementation of the new minimum wage. So until that is implemented and you see an increase in people's income, the likelihood that they will consume higher volume of goods and services is low. So all things being equal, I think it is not likely under the current fiscal arrangement where the government revenue is far below the government expenditure. But to look at 2018, where we had the figure. In 2018, total government revenue was only 3.86 trillion naira. Recurrent expenditure, including debt service, was 8.85 trillion, which means we had a deficit in terms of recurrent expenditure to recurrent revenue of 2 trillion naira. If you add that to the 1.65 trillion naira the government claims is spent on capital expenditure, you are talking of a deficit of 3.65 trillion naira, which indicates, compared, and you consider the fact that we actually had a budget of about 10 trillion and budget revenue about 7.5 trillion last year, then that will show the kind of gap we're experiencing in terms of projected revenue to actual revenue.
Yes, so we're all gathering this momentum on economic data front and pronouncements as far as revenue, budgets, MTF, and all of that is all of this kicking in as we're looking at August inflation over this weekend. And then we're getting ready in about a week and a half or so for the next monetary policy committee meeting of the central bank, which is, of course, a critical one, second to the last one for the current year. What does it all mean? How much tightrope do you think Godwin Emefiele and the rest of his team will be looking into all these numbers put together as they consider the next policy direction, whether they hold, raise, or cut, or at least do some kind of rejigging of the key parameters? Johnson?
Interestingly, the Monetary Policy Committee is in a bit difficult situation. One, the economic growth rate is slowing down. We have seen a quarter-on-quarter for 3 quarters of slowdown in economic activities. We saw a 2.38% GDP in the last quarter of 2018, dropped to 2.1% in the first quarter, and now we're dealing with 1.94%. So ordinarily, what that will do is to recommend for a loosening of the monetary policy. But unfortunately, aside from the decline we've seen in inflation, every other economic parameter is on the negative. Take, for instance, the reserve. The reserve had dropped almost $2 billion in the past 5 weeks. So, which means we are seeing exits of foreign portfolio investment or capital out of the country. And if you reduce the interest rate and therefore reduce the yield on some of the federal government debt instruments, you're going to see further exit or further slowdown in capital importation inflow. Capital importation, which will further erode the reserve. The government today, I mean, the central bank cannot afford a further erosion of the reserve. So they are going to take measures ordinarily to boost the reserve or to encourage foreign portfolio investors to come back into the market, at least stabilize the exchange rate, or keep the exchange rate stable. So in that situation, it is very difficult. It is very difficult for them to say, okay, let us reduce rates, because if they reduce rates, you're going to see impact on inflation, impact on foreign reserves. And it's also, on the other hand, it's difficult for them to also increase rates because we are seeing a further slowdown in economic activities. So I think they are caught between the deep blue sea and the hard rock. I think they will play on the safe side and likely they will retain rates at current level.
Very interesting scenarios you played out for us there. Thank you so much for your insights and perspectives today on the program. Thank you so much, Johnson Chukwu, the CEO at Carrier Asset Management. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about the global marketplace. Yesterday, the European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi says cut interest rate for the Eurozone region and says the QE 2.0 will kick in. That's about $22 billion bond buying program to help stimulate the economic growth of the European region. Of course, you've seen the recession specter in Germany and France also slowing down. So all of this, but again, Brexit is just around the corner. So the question is, will the UK or Britain share in the stimulus by Mario Draghi's ECB? What does it mean? What does yesterday's ECB decisions mean for UK? That's what's where the first question I'm putting to my colleague from our London studios, Juliana Olayinka, this morning. Juliana, good morning. It's good to have you back on the show. It's a Friday, so it's been a very interesting week from the messy and bitter Brexit. Now, yesterday, that's coming through on the economic front from Mario Draghi. Do you think ECB will share in this stimulus 2.0?
Well, yes and no, Bosun. Yesterday, of course, the markets were really anxious to see what Mario Draghi had to say. And as soon as he announced that he would be injecting some life back into the Eurozone, traders seemed to be happy. But this morning, that enthusiasm seems to have fallen flat. The FTSE opened 100 points lower this morning. But of course, you know, the fact that London is within Europe, even though the UK are outside of the Eurozone, anything that really happens in Europe does essentially affect them. So will the UK benefit from this fiscal policy? Not really. But there was some warnings from the ECB, particularly to London-based global banks. Of course, there are several banks that are home and headquartered in the UK. And considering we could potentially be leaving the EU without a deal, there has been a severe warning. And they say that these banks need to start moving a lot of their headquarters, a lot of their staff away from London. This was an agreement between these banks and the ECB. It hasn't come into full effect. So yes, that is one of the main sticking points for London from yesterday's meeting, and that is get sharply moving with your staff members.
If you plan to move out of London to Europe and you go via British Airways, I'm sure it's going to be a very bumpy one. That's if you get any flight to go with via BA, by the way. So it's not a TGI for flyers of BA, is it?
It is, and of course, you know, the troubled issues between the embattled airline keeps on brewing. Of course, they had that 48-hour strike at the beginning of this week, and just this morning, British Airways has begun cancelling hundreds of flights because that second planned strike on September the 27th does indeed seem like it's going ahead. This planned strike, the second one, is expected to affect about 10,000 customers. And one of the main issues with this story is that BA can only compensate under EU laws. And yes, Britain is still within the EU. They can only compensate passengers if their flights have been cancelled less than 14 days. So it's the 15th day and they've cancelled these flights. So it's absolutely terrible. Of course, the problem is with the pilots. Pilots who are represented under the BALPA union are not happy with BA's offer of an 11.5% pay rise over 3 years. BA is saying, look, you know, this pay rise would mean some of the pilots are going to be earning upwards of £200,000 a year, but they're not happy with that. They want more. They want a share of the profits because BA have been doing exceptionally well over the past 12 months, and they don't think that they've been given enough benefits or compensation for that. Downing Street have got involved. They got involved before the beginning of the strike this week, and they said sort it out. And they've issued the same statement again, saying, you know, this is becoming catastrophic for Heathrow and Gatwick. So both sides are saying that they are willing to talk. But for now, if you are flying with BA on the 27th of September, check your flight.
Julian, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. Not anywhere. I'm just happy being here for now. I don't want to get caught up in the entire political Brexit and BA and whatever. For now, let's just do this on camera and via satellite transmissions and all of that. That's for now. I just hold on a little bit here. Let's get everything cleared up a little bit. And maybe before October 31st or thereafter. But then I'm going to find a way there. We still have that lunch just we talked about there. You know, it was a virgin that we said it's going to be. You remember?
I remember.
Yeah. It was going to be a virgin. Okay, have a great weekend, Juliana. But don't take that break yet. Hang in there in the afternoon for Chimezie Obiwago on Business Incorporated. Thank you so much out of our London studios.
Thank you both.
My colleague, Juliana Olayenka. I'll talk to another colleague of mine here in Lagos by the name Temple Ashaju after the break. Stick around, everyone.